This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream and Nebula. Hey everybody, so in the original 1992 Aladdin, this is the scene where Aladdin, our protagonist, meets Jasmine, his love interest. Jasmine is walking around the city, pretending to be a common person. She sees some hungry children, takes some food from a nearby vendor, and gives it to them. When the vendor confronts her, she immediately apologizes multiple times and assures the man that if he just let her go back to the palace, she could pay him easily.
No one steals from my cart.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't have any money.
Thief!
Oh, please. If you let me go to the palace, I can get some from the Sultan.
Do you know what the penalty is for stealing?
This is a very simple character building moment for Jasmine, one that tells us most of what we need to know about her. She is nice, good-natured, but also naive, ignorant. She took this vendor's food because she doesn't know what money is, because she has lived as a princess in the palace for her whole life. In other words, this is Jasmine's first taste of freedom and learning, and that makes sense because her entire character arc is about freedom and learning. The 2019 live-action movie changes this moment in a subtle but very important way. Now, when the vendor confronts Jasmine, she says this.
Stealing? No,
I take bracelet.
Sir, I don't have any money. Let go of me!
No! Take it easy, Jamal. Khalil walks away from the stall. And this one! She steals the bread!
Those children were hungry.
That's right, she doesn't apologize, she's not all that confused, and she certainly doesn't feel bad. Now, she stands up for herself. This new interaction is really odd, right? Because I think we can plausibly read it in two very different ways. The first way is obvious. It's the way that was clearly intended by the film and that is meant to be understood by literal children. Jasmine's line here paints her as a political actor who has the right opinions. She sees some children starving and gives them some food. No, the food did not belong to her or the kid, but from her perspective, the maintenance of private property isn't worth letting people die. As she says in her own self-righteous way, those children were hungry, a sentence meant to justify her criminal actions. Now, I am, of course, sympathetic to Jasmine here. As you might imagine, I don't like it when kids die and think that what she did made sense given the circumstances. But this leads us to our second interpretation of the scene, that Jasmine is just a judgmental hypocrite. Jasmine is a literal princess, and her main goal in this film is to become the Sultan. In other words, she is an agent of the state, one who wields tremendous power and wealth, and who lusts after more. So then, what on earth gives her the right to tell this vendor that his bread should be free to the starving? Are her resources that no doubt eclipse this man's by multiple orders of magnitude available to the needy? No, they're not, and this fact never changes. By the end of the film, Jasmine is the Sultan, and seemingly nothing all that meaningful or revolutionary happens as a result of that. She doesn't make sure all the poor have enough food. In fact, hungry kids never even come up after this scene. Poverty is just a prop. So then, here we find some interesting narrative tension, right? A character who questions authority, challenges the ways that resources are distributed, yet never seems to question her own authority, what she represents, the status quo she works to uphold. We might say then that our new Aladdin movie is deeply confused about power. It is fixated, in a way the original film never quite was, on how we should conceptualize the ruling class, how society ought to be structured, on the strange and mysterious ways that power functions. And in this video, I just want to dive deep into the strange rabbit hole that this film presents us. Oh, one thing. I recently moved my apartment, and I don't know if this new set looks all that great. I am working on it, but please cut me some fucking slack. Okay. Okay, we'll come back to Jasmine and this peculiar scene in a while, like toward the end of the video, but for now, let's change our tune and talk about language. If I asked you, what is the definition of the word prince, I imagine that most of you would give me one answer. A prince is the son of a monarch. He either has, will have, or could have some authority in some state, largely based on his parentage. It's not that simple, of course. Prince Philip, for example, was not a prince because he was the son of a monarch, but because Queen Elizabeth declared him so. But either way, it seems like being a prince has something to do with A, having some power in some country, and B, being related through some process to a monarchical dynasty. I bring all this up because after Aladdin finds the lamp, after the genie gives him 3 wishes, Aladdin's first wish is to become a prince.
Hey, can you make me a prince?
There is a lot of gray area in Make Me a Prince.
And on first blush, it seems like the genie doesn't make him one. Sure, Genie gives Aladdin a fun outfit, throws him a parade, etc., but he doesn't give him any power in any country, and he doesn't make him related to a monarchical dynasty. That's puzzling, and I'm by no means the first person who's found that puzzling. There's actually an existential comics about this that's pretty fun. So, trying to resolve this strange situation, we can respond in one of 2 ways. First, we could say that the genie just didn't grant Aladdin's wish. This is what Existential Comics concludes, in fact, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Aladdin wished for one thing, the genie gave him another, so I guess he lied. Simple as that. That said, I personally just don't think that the genie is a liar. I don't think he'd do that to Aladdin, do that to my boy. And that's why I prefer the second response that we could give. That maybe the genie did grant Aladdin's wish, completely granted in every sense of the word, but just did so in a really odd way. See, in addition to the definition of prince that we provided before, the one related to royalty and power, we can imagine another definition. A prince is somebody who people call a prince. There's really no definition more concise or elegant than that, right? It can be applied to just about anything. What is an apple? That thing we call apple. What is a Furby? Well, it's a Furby, and it seems to be this definition of the word prince that the genie is using. To the genie, prince is just a social performance, and for that reason there's no need to give Aladdin a country or make him related to some king. All Aladdin actually requires is a cool outfit and a parade, and for everyone to look at him and say, that's a prince. All of this can be said of the original film, of course. Much of the same stuff happens in that movie.
Hey, can you make me a prince?
But the remake really hammers it in. The genie and Aladdin constantly talk about how Aladdin is a prince of nowhere, a Babwa, a fake city.
I'm afraid I'm unfamiliar with Ababwa.
Well, it's north.
At one point, Jasmine looks at a map trying to find this place, and the genie just quickly adds it. Aladdin is a prince. That is what he wished for, and that is what he got, but the process through which he becomes one is framed constantly and quite literally as a function of language. There's something that really works for me about this, in that when we go looking for it, we can see this idea coming up over and over in Aladdin. We can see it in the Sultan, this bumbling, brainwashed figure who performs the role of Sultan, who is considered the head of Agrabah, but who does nothing, whose entire kingdom is controlled by Jafar. We can see it in Aladdin. In the very first scene we meet our protagonist, he's stealing some bread, and the guards chasing after him call him riffraff, street rat. Riff-raff, street rat. And Aladdin famously says, I don't buy that. Here, Aladdin's class, his position, is posed not simply as a function of material reality, but as a social role in proximity to power, an identity that has been forced on him. But importantly, there's nothing about Aladdin that makes this the case. No essential street ratness to his being. And as we watch the movie, we learn that there's so much more to Aladdin than being a street rat. Just a whole lot more.
They'd find out there's so much more to me.
And finally here, we can see it in a line that Jafar says in the remake.
Steal an apple and you're a thief. Steal a kingdom and you're a statesman.
This is the most on-the-nose shit imaginable, right? Here, Jafar outright says that the difference between a legitimate action, being a statesman, and an illegitimate, deviant one, stealing food, is not some moral proposition with gravity. No, it's just a matter of performance, who you are, and how you are received. And so, in a funky way, it makes a lot of sense that when Aladdin asks to be a prince, he is not given a country or a royal family. No, to find out if you are a prince or a sultan or a street rat or a statesman, you must simply ask, what language game am I playing and where have I been arbitrarily placed at the table? So far in this video, I think I've kept things fairly simple and close to a common sense reading of this text. Maybe one or two of you are, as we speak, writing a comment like, Big Joel thinks he's so smart just because he adequately interpreted a film meant for children. Please, I should do what he does, and he should clean my balls. You know, that's actually the second time on my channel that I've said that sentence. I should do what you do, and you should clean my balls. I don't know why exactly I like it so much, but I do. There's just something that's so viscerally appealing about it, right? Like, imagine that you were working for Amazon and you were in a union and you were all striking, and Jeff Bezos came in to break up the strike, and one of the union guys was like, CEO of Amazon? More like CEO of my ass. I should do what you do, and you should clean my balls. And like, all the union guys were like, oh shit, you went there, dude. And Jeff Bezos was like, blah, 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 blah. How dare you speak to me like that? And everyone started chanting like, clean my balls, Jeff Bezos. Like, can you imagine something like that happening in real life? That would be pretty lit, right? But anyway, the reason I wanted to go through all of this with you is because it is absolutely necessary to fully understand what's coming next in this video. Let's talk about one of the most wild scenes I've ever watched in a movie. So later on in Aladdin, Jafar steals the lamp and conjures up the genie to make some wishes. The very first thing he asks is to be the Sultan.
For my first wish, I wish to be Sultan of Agrabah.
As a response to this wish coming true, Hakim, the Sultan's guard, a character invented for the remake, immediately becomes loyal to Jafar, the new Sultan.
You obey the Sultan, so you obey me now.
Then, Jasmine sings a song and yells at Hakim about how he shouldn't stay true to Jafar, and he turns his loyalty back to Jasmine and the original Sultan, her father.
My princess.
I think the first question we should probably ask about this moment is this. When Jafar asks the genie to be a sultan, what does the genie do? It certainly seems like he doesn't do very much at all, right? He kind of just gives him a big hat, puts him down, and acts like the wish was granted. If you said to me, you know what, Big Joel, I sure do wish to be president, and I looked at you and gave you a president's hat and said, wish granted, most of us would not think I had actually done the job, right? Most people wouldn't go on to call you the president. And it's hard for me to see how this situation with the genie is any different. Once again then, we might feel tempted to say, well, I guess the genie just did not do what he was asked to do. What a dick. But see, that just cannot be the case, because in this movie, Hakim is right there, this person who has sworn loyalty to the Sultan. And after the genie does whatever he does, Hakim believes he must be loyal to Jafar. It seems to me that this strange event describes an understanding of power that is kind of the opposite of the one we had before. As we said before, Aladdin becoming the prince is conceptualized as this moment of performance. His princeness comes from a series of gestures, a parade, and some clothes. As the movie implies, these trappings are all that a relationship to power is. But for Jafar, that's not true. Everybody already knows who he is, and there is no real work put into making him the Sultan in the minds of the people around him. No, there's only one real conclusion that we can come to, that when the genie grants Jafar's wish to be a Sultan, he is actually, meaningfully changed into one. There is some metaphysical force that makes sultans sultans, and the genie gives him that. Power here is not language, it's not a game, it is a rigid set of supreme laws. In one of the most telling scenes in the film, something that was there in the original, Jafar, now a sorcerer, unmasks Aladdin.
Aladdin.
He's been pretending the entire time. An imposter.
It is genuinely difficult to make sense of Jafar saying this line. Here we have a man who has, for the entire movie, been lusting after control of the genie. When he finally gets that control, his first wish is to be a sultan. And yet, he looks at Aladdin and concludes that he's a liar, that he isn't a real prince. How does that make any sense at all? These two boys attain their titles in the exact same way, through the power of a genie. So what kind of distinction could Jafar possibly be making here? Why would he believe that Aladdin is not a prince if he believes that he is a sultan? And the wild thing is, within the movie, it seems like Jafar is correct. That he is a real sultan and that Aladdin is not a real prince. After all, after this moment, the entire court sees Aladdin for what he truly is, no longer see him as Prince Ali. And since the only thing making Aladdin a prince in the first place was being perceived as one, when his perception changes, so too does his title. Even the genie implicitly agrees that he is no longer a prince.
And here it is. Must marry a prince. Right. But you say the words, and this law just kind of like goes away.
But Jafar, with his strange supernatural claim to the throne, seems to be a sultan to the end. It's important to note that while Hakim does end up rebelling against him, he's convinced to do so because Jasmine tells him to stop following traditions so much.
But now you have to choose. Duty isn't always honor. Our greatest challenge isn't speaking up against our enemies, but defying those whose approval we seek the most.
In other words, Jafar is a sultan. This is a hard reality that cannot be denied, but Hakim decides, maybe I just shouldn't follow the sultan anymore. You know, these days, it seems like looking at a film's puzzles and inconsistencies is often seen as passé or dull. We all know what Aladdin is about, right? It's not a hard movie to watch or comprehend. I mean, it's Aladdin, right? So why care about its inner logic so much? But here, I want to ask a question. Why are we able to understand this movie? Why is it that the first time I saw Aladdin 2019, none of this really occurred to me? Like, if you were some kind of robot trying to understand humanity through the movies it makes, it seems only natural that you'd stop and wonder about these basic things. Wait, what is a prince in this movie? What is a sultan? What's up with this genie who can supposedly grant any wish, but who never seems to do what you expect him to? Who has authority in this movie, and why? These aren't unimportant questions as far as I'm concerned. They're fundamental to the plot of this film. So, why don't we care? I want to contend something here, that the very fact that they could make Aladdin without considering these things, that we can watch it without our brains breaking, without even getting confused, tells us something about ourselves. Tells us that power, as far as we are concerned, doesn't need or even really want some coherent explanation. We might like to think of ourselves as these rational agents, people who look at statecraft and government and say, this is how it works, and this is why. And if something doesn't make sense, if we don't think some power is just or logical or whatever, we'll say, well, that's dumb. We're not following our own standards here. Let's change it. But Aladdin 2019 comes in and says, no, it's not quite that simple. At least within this fictional world, the thought experiment that it provides, power requires no explanation. It can be illegible, but nonetheless, just kinda work. Let's return to the scene that started this all. Jasmine, standing in the market, giving some bread to some hungry kids and getting mad at the vendor for calling her a thief.
She steal the bread!
Those children were hungry.
Because I hope that we can now see that this moment is a microcosm of the entire film. On one hand, Jasmine here conceptualizes power as a kind of cruel performance. In the same way that the only difference between a street rat and a prince is a bunch of arbitrary gestures, the only difference between children starving and not starving is an arbitrary rule. The food is there, the kids are hungry, so why should we call it stealing when they eat? But on the other hand, Jasmine conceptualizes power as a divine and unchanging claim to the throne. In the same way that Jafar truly becomes a sultan as a matter of fact after he makes his wish, Jasmine can maintain her station, maintain her riches and her authority because she is, in all ways, a princess. Looking at this now, I want to say no. That's not how this works, Jasmine. Either your power to rule and profit from this country is as illegitimate as the vendor wanting to keep his food, or you're both fine and can keep your possessions from the people who need them. You can't have it both ways. But to watch this film, none of this particularly matters. The vendor is bad. He shouldn't keep his food. Jasmine has no such moral obligation and should, in fact, be the Sultan because she's so good. Power is quietly incomprehensible, a blur that neither can nor should be understood. And that's all right by us. So I think I can take a stab at what you're feeling right now. Wow, that was a great video by Big Joel. Aladdin, more like Aladdin, because that video was so good that it was frankly radical. But now that it's done, all I want is more of him. I can't think about anything else, and I'm starting to worry that there's something very broken inside of me. And that's why I'm excited to talk about the streaming service Nebula. Every month for the foreseeable future, I'll be releasing a video on there. So right now, there's a video about Shane Dawson's weird 9/11 trutherism. There's a video about the channel's School of Life and why people defend it. And most recently, there's a video about how much I hate the film About Time. I truly hate that movie with all of myself, every fiber of my being. And so I'm excited to finally have the opportunity to tell somebody about that. These videos can be released to the public, usually after like a year, but most of them probably won't be, since they're not always going to be something algorithm friendly or something I'd want to release on my channel for whatever reason. I've really enjoyed making these videos, and it seems like people have been enjoying watching them, so it's been a good time all around. The whole thing is pretty cool. With a subscription to Curiosity Stream, where you can watch great nature documentaries like this David Attenborough one about ants, you'll also get access to Nebula, where you get my videos early, those bonus ones I talked about, and access to tons of other stuff. Bonus vids from Lindsay Ellis, Sarah Zed, Tom Scott, more than that. For $15, you get the whole thing for a year, which, you know, I think that's a pretty good deal. Anyhow, if you're interested in any of that, sign up at the link in my description. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching my video. Man, this was a weird one. Like, I was so passionate about this Aladdin project for so long, and now that it's done, now that I kind of watched it over, I was like, man, is this dense. This is the most confusing shit I've ever put on YouTube, I feel like. Like, I'm watching it like, are people gonna see the difference between Jafar and Aladdin's claim to power? Are they gonna be receptive to the fact that they're entirely different processes? Or did I not convey that enough? I'm just sitting here at 3 a.m. wondering about this one. But if you did like it, if it did work for you, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and give me money on Patreon if you want. Just so you know, all the videos I release over on Nebula are also released there. I didn't want to make anyone feel ripped off or whatever. And now it's time for my Patreon question of the video. I'll make it a short one because I've talked for a long time already. Sandra GL asks, From one Jew to another, what's your bagel order? Everything bagel with chive cream cheese, please. Okay, bye everybody. See ya.